Good day, and such a warm welcome to you. It's an honor and pleasure to be here with you this morning. This is part one of the imperative of restorative justice within family law systems. I'm Molly Rowan Leach, and I'm founder, excuse me, and host, faculty as well, of Restorative Justice on the Rise, which is a collaborative online global platform advocating for restorative practices within human systems. And I founded RJ on the Rise, which is not just about me, certainly it's about all of us. We have an extensive faculty from all over the world, including our wonderful special guest today, Amber Turner. We offer educational trainings, both on the ground and online, as well as our ongoing podcast, for which this conversation today will be put up onto. Now, for those of you who signed up for our full 3-hour workshop, just a quick note that, of course, that will be in 2 weeks from today. It'll be a full 3-hour session, including presentation, examples, and discussion. So thanks for your patience. We're just allowing for a little bit more time for registration on that. But today we have a real treat for you. We're going to be diving into a conversation with Amber in just a moment about family law systems and her work for 17 years in the London, UK barrister system as a litigator within those systems. She's a holistic attorney, a holistic lawyer. I have a special place in my heart for people doing cutting edge work in law. There's so much that we can do together collaboratively to transform systems from within. Last week, we were on a podcast with Dr. Howard Zehr, and he said just the same thing, to quote him, that we can and must and should work alongside and with those within traditional systems in order to affect change, and to do that in a way that is relational instead of doing to or for. And I'm kind of quoting Ted Wachtel's power dynamics, the shift that we are within systems work, from doing over or to doing with. And that's no small task. So today's topic is, again, family law systems and restorative justice. We will look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks for our full-on workshop. So without further ado, I'd love to dive into a conversation together with Amber and invite you to ask questions, to interact as you wish, and we'll get started today. Amber, it's wonderful to have you here all the way from Gibraltar, by the sea. Lucky you. I'm coming to you from Colorado, where we just had a snow this morning. We were talking about that in the green room. I wanted people to know a little bit about how you and I have connected too, because it's interesting. I have a history of advocacy work in restorative justice, and I think you've showed up quite a few times to some of our trainings, namely, and most interestingly, I think for me in the last year, with Anodea Judith and her energy and human systems work, collaborating with restorative justice. That's the cutting edge of this field. Learning how to become more aware of how we show up and what we're bringing in our work in law systems, in social healing and dialogue is very important. So I really appreciate everything that you're doing with your work. I encourage people, of course, to hop over to your website, and I'm not going to recount that right now, but we will at the midpoint and end of today's session together, just to encourage people to find out more about your cutting edge work in law. So thank you for being here. It's afternoon in Gibraltar. It's probably lovely.
Yeah. It is. Thank you so much. That's kind and generous introduction. And I just want to take a minute to honor you and your work, because it is people like you who've been working at the cutting edge for over a decade with your restorative justice on the rise, and your backstory, which you've shared so vulnerably with us on so many occasions, is so powerful. And it's that kind of authenticity and that kind of connection to truth that is changing people's minds and hearts. So thank you for that, and thank you for the invitation to share this platform today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Amber. And I know that for those who might be listening in after the fact, and those that are here today in the room with us, a lot of times people who are impacted by criminal justice systems, whether it be family law or traditional criminal punitive systems, we're kind of like separate from each other. We don't always get a chance to connect and know that we're not alone. And I know here in the US, we have alarming statistics around incarceration. We're less than 5% of the world's population over here in the US, and yet we incarcerate 25% of the entirety of the world's population. That's ahead of China. That's ahead of other countries that you would think are more punitive, but yet here we are. So we have our work cut out for us. And part of the purpose of this space is to help people feel a sense of connectivity, that you're not alone if you've been through family law or someone you love has, because it impacts you, even though it may not have been directly you. I bet you've been impacted by it. If you know someone that's been through divorce and it's been ugly, there's an impact, a ripple effect that's going on that needs to be addressed. So we're hoping, Amber and I today, to get into some ideas about how we can start transforming. I myself have been through a very unfortunate family law situation. And so I have insights as well that actually I'm really happy that I went through it, because in a way it's helped me to see the inside of the system very intimately, and also from a restorative lens as a practitioner and former executive director of restorative justice program here in Colorado. So that's
Absolutely.
a mouthful. Yeah. So let's dive in though, Amber. We have a lot to discuss in a short amount of time. So why don't we start with issues that arise for families and children in the adversarial system, and
Sure.
why you think it doesn't work, or
Well,
what you.
it's not even that I think it doesn't work. I now know
Yeah.
firsthand it doesn't work. And a lot of my clients have very courageously shared their own testimonials on my website as well, of how working in a more, what I call holistic approach, which I now sort of see as almost a parallel to restorative justice approach, has helped them enormously in their journeying through such what can be such a dark and acrimonious and difficult and painful process. So I trained in London in 1998 to become a barrister at law, which meant that my get-go plan as a young student and a lawyer was to right the wrongs, was to help families in crisis and get them to the other side. But what I realized literally from day one in law practice was that the focus within law firms, at least in my personal experience, was more centered around budgets, targets, making money as a priority. And then it was almost as if our duty of care to our clients was secondary somehow. So to give you an example of what that looked like, some years later on, I think I was already somewhat like 10 years into law practice. I remember seeing a couple who came to see me together, and I'll explain a bit about how that started happening organically. And I saw them in the boardroom of my law firm. Sorry, not my law firm, the law firm I was working for. And after asking them the right questions, which I think is a great thing that Howard Zare refers to in his book, The Little Book of Restorative Justice. He says in restorative justice, we need to ask different questions. And it's so true. Dr. Gabor Mate also speaks of compassionate inquiry. Let's ask the right questions. So instead of sitting down and, basically sliding the retainer letter across the boardroom table and asking them to sign it and, okay, let's get going with filling in the blanks in this template document that's going to guarantee you get your divorce fast-tracked, it was more a question of presence. First of all, taking a breath and being present with those clients. And I call it a sensory checklist. So I take stock of what's I can feel is coming from them, how they're engaging between themselves, what their body language is, are they making eye contact, the tone and pace of their voices. And all I could hear and sense was a sense of sadness. And so this was literally whilst they were waiting in the waiting area down to the boardroom, I could already inform myself that there was something here that didn't sit right with, oh, this couple has come here to get a divorce. So in the boardroom, I asked them whether, it would be okay with them for me to explore further and just ask them a bit about themselves, their backgrounds, what was going on in their lives at that particular point in time. And what came up, Molly, was really, really powerful, because it transpired that the wife's mum was diagnosed with cancer and she was terminally ill. And so she was actually the only sole carer for her mother in that time. And that was obviously creating a situation of burnout for her. And when I spoke to her husband, he was going through being a target of workplace bullying. So ultimately, when I spoke to them from the lens of, okay, what's going on with each one of you individually, what's happening in your life story right now, the why, it's like, can we dig a bit deeper in presence, in using mindfulness and seek that truth of what is the truth, what is the situation, real situation, what's really going on here? Because unless we get to the root causes of why people understand that they have a legal problem or a conflict or a dispute, we're not going to be able to solve anything for them as lawyers.
I have to stop you right there, if you don't mind. And yes, that's all I can say is yes. Well, I could say more, and I'm going to, but that right there is such a huge piece of what I've witnessed as well. The root cause and core of the situation can only truly be uncovered by restorative justice practices that are well and conscientiously held, by facilitators who are asking the right questions, guiding the conversation in a certain direction that isn't just a means to an end, to a signature on an MOU or a form, right? And so in your experience, have you seen like what on the other side of not getting to that root cause and core, what have you seen occur? And I know this is probably jumping ahead in our conversation a bit.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Just to close the last story, all I'd say is just very briefly is that the couple, it was very evident that what they were going through at that point in time in their lives was meant that neither one of them could support each other in the way that they had in the past, and they were interpreting that as that they had a marriage, breakdown. So they reconciled. Well, they didn't reconcile; they just didn't get divorced. They didn't separate. They didn't get divorced. And but according to the law firm view of that, it was I had lost clients. So that is just one thing that I want to then come back to later on if we have time, Ollie, because I think one of the big pressures on lawyers not being able to operate in a way that is offering this kind of facilitation that you do in your restorative justice practices is because lawyers in turn are also being pressurized because of these targets and budgets that are set by law firms to just literally churn out cases. So thank you for your question as well for the second question. What I've, as a lawyer, literally first year into practice, I did a lot of juvenile cases. And one of the interesting things about the system in the UK is that as a junior, you have to wait your turn. It doesn't matter if you show up early to court, your case will only be called once all the senior lawyers, senior to you on the bench, if you like, have had their cases heard. That gave me it's a very clever idea, because what it gives you is the opportunity to sit and observe other lawyers and clients and their clients and the cases going on in court. But what it actually did for me was to fuel a sense of injustice, which is the opposite to what I obviously was expecting to experience as a junior lawyer. One of the cases, for instance, was a teenager who had committed, it was a minor offense, and he was there with his mother. His mother spoke to the court and explained that she was a single mother, a mother of 4 children, and she was working 2 jobs to keep, the finances going, to be able to pay for the rent, the food, the utility bills, and put clothes on her kids' backs. And, in that situation, the magistrate's response in terms of a penalty was to fine her for the intransigence of her teenage son. And that to me was just, honestly, I can't even explain to you this shot that, of injustice that went all the way through my body, like literally like a free fall, an elevator in free fall. That's all I can explain. It went to the pit of my stomach. I thought, oh my goodness, this is not what I became a lawyer to do. This is not justice. This is not fair. This is not righting any wrongs. This, in fact, is causing even more stress and more pressure on that family unit. It's not offering the teenager any kind of insight into, again, the question as to the why. Why did you commit this minor offense? Or, what's going on with you? What kind of support do you need, so that we can take a look at the behaviors, the destructive behaviors, the self-sabotaging behaviors, and offer an opportunity to transform those into something more positive. And it doesn't address the family unit and the impact, the ripple effect of that kind of a decision, not only on a mother who's a single mom who's already strained financially, but on the impact on the rest of that family unit, her other children too. So that's just one example of that was in the juvenile court. In the family courts, one thing that I really want to impress on people is that there is no such thing as a win. So although in the adversarial systems, people think, it's all about winning, or losing, so there's a winner or a loser, I challenge that way of thinking. And the reason for that is, let me give you an example of what that looks like. So let's say that there's a husband and a wife and 2 kids, and they're going through a very acrimonious divorce. There's been some sort of infidelity on one side or the other. I'm not going to take sides here on this one. And that basically mom and dad are like at each other's throats, right? So there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of acrimony. Now, it won't matter whether a judge makes an order that a certain amount of child maintenance needs to be paid, let's say by the husband, which is in the majority of cases, or that the mother has to allow, or the wife, the mother has to allow the father to have access to those children, contact to those children on specific dates. When people leave courtrooms angry, they will not comply with those orders. So after having gone through the stress, the worry, the fear, the anxiety, the uncertainty of having to show up in a courtroom and not know whether, which way the land's going to lie at the end of the case. You don't know who this stranger, the judge is, what kind of orders they're going to make. They may or may not fit in well with your family dynamic. They may or may not fit in well with your work situation, if you're working shifts and so on. But aside from all of that, then you come through a process which takes a long time, which costs a lot of money, which costs people's mental health, emotional health, physical health, and spiritual health. And which at the end of the day, actually, for not all cases, I can't say in terms of percentages, but I would say for many cases, unless, again, the root cause or the pain is addressed, it's for nothing, because they will end up breaching those very orders. And all that will happen is that one lawyer on one side will be encouraging the client to take the matter back to court for breach of the maintenance order or for breach of a contact order. So then all that does again is just perpetuate a situation of pain and suffering and cause even more trauma. So those are just a couple of examples of why there is no such thing as a winner and a loser. I think everybody loses. In obviously there's exceptional cases, which I'm not saying that no case should ever go to court. I know that there are exceptional cases, especially when there's a lot of violence that may need to be dealt with in that way. But in the majority of cases, I would say even in 80% of the cases, I believe restorative justice approaches are certainly a lot healthier for everyone. And because they go to root cause, to the underlying.
Exactly. Wow. Thank you for that. As I can't speak for anyone else, but as a survivor, I call myself a survivor of the family law system in the United States, because it is big mess, and it does exactly what you are talking about. It impacts financial, mental, physical, emotional health, and it ripples out. It ripples out beyond the immediate parties involved. To the children, of course, they pick up on things.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely,
Spoken,
Molly.
unspoken. Yeah, even if you try to and do your best to keep positive and keep family life moving ahead, it impacts everyone regardless in very detrimental ways. And so, yeah, you line up what you just spoke to lines up exactly what my own personal experience is, as well as what I've witnessed with colleagues and friends who have also been through the family law system here in the US. And I can imagine that it's similar in no matter where you go in the world. If those needs and the voice of each party is not heard in a certain way, then it will perpetuate. You will continue to be drained financially and in all the other ways that you just mentioned, I believe.
I call it winning the battle and losing the war. And this is how I explain it to
Mhm.
my clients. You don't want to win the battle and lose the war. And that's why I organically started creating what I call this holistic approach to family law. It was something that came to me intuitively. And I find that there's a lot of power in that. Why? Because it means that I mean, that there have been so many other people that I've connected with only in the last 5 years. So I've been practicing 24 years in total now. So I'd already gone through 17 years of litigating, but trying my best to infuse these holistic approaches with my clients, which worked really well towards out-of-court settlements, for example, as a way of keeping clients away from courtrooms, keeping children away from courtrooms. But still, it's only been in the last 5 years that I've connected with like-minded lawyers and others in the profession in the legal field, and they had similar experiences. It's almost like we've all had this awakening, more or less at the same time, because I know that this movement started around the 70s and 80s. For me, obviously, I picked up in the 90s, but created this beautiful space, but really from a place of trying to meet the basic human needs of clients. And that's what it really comes down to. It's a common sense approach. Let's go back to common sense. Let's go back to what human beings' basic needs are. And let's start thinking about how we can infuse, say, those kind of practices, restorative justice practices, what I call my holistic approach, into the mix. I mean, one of the things I did, Molly, was very early on, actually, even when I worked with other law firms, was to start building what I call a holistic network. Because one of the things, of course, that the restorative justice models offer that adversarial systems don't, is an opportunity to bring that gentle intervention for transformation, for healing. And of course, in the adversarial system, that is absent. So my way of alleviating that was to create my own network of holistic healing professionals. So I would start by making a phone call. For example, the example I gave you earlier was to the Cancer Relief Center, or I'd make a phone call to my yoga therapist or to a psychologist or even to an art therapist, depending on the need of the particular client, because of course one size doesn't fit all and everybody's different, right? So and I believe so strongly that if every single law firm, and it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be in family law, it can be in any other area where there is trauma, like medical negligence, personal injury, workplace bullying, crime. Obviously, we already have the restorative justice model, but in any other, every single law firm that is practicing any of those kind of areas were to very simply have on their website what I did was which is to say, okay, clients are not just clients. Later on, I developed, after my own burnout, the idea that, okay, holistic should include the lawyer too, right? We need to also look after our own well-being. So to have just a very simple directory, all it takes is a directory of 5 or 6 people to be able to support your client through the process. And now, as I say, I'm including lawyers in the mix too, and law students too. And that holistic well-being network will be like coming to the table, if you like, to address the trauma that could be, or that in many cases I've witnessed is the underlying root cause that people have the conflict or the legal problem. And so that is one way of addressing the issue for practitioners who are in family law and outside, you know, as I say, outside who want to practice, who are in the adversarial system, and but still want to kind of infuse these kind of restorative practices.
Mm. I just want to mention for those who are listening and hear that Amber is a holistic attorney. Her website is www.amberlaw.com. And there's a bundle of information there, a lot of resources, and you're doing some great work with collaborative partners globally. And it's just very exciting to be talking with you today. And it's also practical. So there's a couple things that you just named that I wanted to respond to, if I may, and then we'll go to another question for you to expand on. So when we come back together in 2 weeks, we're going to unpack the, you know, the ground level pieces that restorative justice practices can be infused into after relationships are built within a legal law system, a court system. For example, here in Colorado, in District 11, Chaffee County, and also in our municipal court, we have the favor of judges and of the DAs for restorative justice. We also have the law in place, thanks to former Senator and Representative Pete Lee and his colleagues, that citizens may request a restorative justice process. Let me repeat that. Citizens have the right to request restorative justice here in Colorado, in the United States, by law.
Absolutely.
So, you know, that is something that is our right. And with that favor and that relationship building that has been done over the last 10 years here where I'm sitting, thanks to a lot of colleagues here, that's the route that we have to take in order to convince and show that these practices are viable. They reduce recidivism. They go to the root cause and core. They address, like you said, the unique aspects that come into the room with each individual. For higher level cases that are maybe even borderline violent. I mean, there's many spectrums of violence, right? It could be argued that violence is this, what we're talking about today. But that said, like with domestic violence, even in those cases, restorative justice is viable if it's held appropriately with the proper steps. We're not talking about bringing parties together immediately. We're talking about tending to their individual needs. Restorative justice never brings people together without pre-work and pre-conferencing. So please let that be known to everybody here and listening, that restorative justice is not a kumbaya where we just throw everybody together. It's a very carefully conducted, facilitated process by people who know what they're doing, hopefully, and who have seasoned experience in different types of cases, who've worked with mentors and practitioners in the field for some time. But what we're looking at is the unique ability to give voice and give say, maybe for the first time, and sometimes individually in private with our client, to those unmet needs and to the very, very real concerns that are going on. If those are not given voice, like you said earlier, to your point, the root cause and core, it will perpetuate. There will just be destruction and loss of financial, emotional, physical health. The ripple effects will be detrimental for the most part. I mean, maybe there's a few family law cases where that's not the case. I would like to see them.
Me too.
Yeah.
I've never.
So,
just
yeah.
a quote just on point to what you've
Yes.
just said. I'm sorry, I can't remember who said it, but they say you cannot change what you cannot see. And so unless we're working with our clients to identify, to dig deep and to identify their why, we're not going to be able to sustain, to give any kind of sustainable solutions. And that for me is an ethical issue. Why? Because if a client comes to me, let's say in the case of domestic violence, let's say, or domestic abuse, and they're in this very toxic relationship, and they come to see me, and we have a conversation. My questions will be obviously held in a way that is holding space for them safely, where they can feel safe. There is certainly no judgment at all. And I know that I need to use my tools of empathy and compassion. And for me, what I would love in those situations, my clients to see, is where the attraction, and I know this is we're very careful how I measure my words here, the attraction to that kind of partner, or to stay in that kind of environment where it came from. And of course, this, as we know, is not a conscious choice. It's an unconscious, subconscious choice, which is coming, in all likelihood, at least in my experience, from intergenerational trauma. So if I can unlock in them, if I can help them see and become awake and aware to some of the situations that maybe they've gone through in life, in their earlier years, in their formative years, that have led them to where they are today, what will happen then is I'm not just going to assist them through the legal process by, drafting documents and filing them and advocating and so on, and just fixing what's happened in the present. My wish for them is that in identifying now the root cause, they can start going to see someone in the holistic network, which, by the way, is commission free. I don't get any commission whatsoever. And that's important, because they need to understand that the referrals are coming from a place of pure intention and not from a financial gain. At least that's my personal view on it. But they can go to somebody in the holistic network and start resolving that trauma, which will then mean, hopefully, going to your point again, that in future, when the next potential relationship partner comes along, they'll be able to more easily identify the red flags, and they won't just deep dive straight into it and repeat the cycle all over again, which, as you've rightly said, Molly, is going to again perpetuate pain, perpetuate suffering, and so on and so forth. So to me, being a lawyer with, in order for us to discharge our duty of care to our client, for me, I'm seeing my client holistically as not separate from their case. Their case is not something that's happening on paper. It's something that's happening to them at all levels: mind, body, emotion, spirit. And that any kind of trauma that is sitting in that energy body is something that needs to be looked at, addressed, acknowledged, and healed, if possible, not by the lawyer, because again, I know that there's been some people who've come up to me and said, well, but Amber, as a holistic lawyer, does that mean that you think that you're a therapist? You think that you're a counselor? Absolutely not. Of course not. So of course, there have to be healthy boundaries there too, where,
Could I just stop you? If I'm sorry to interrupt, really am.
No,
But due to our limited time, I just want to say, to your point, just to add to that, restorative justice practitioners are not mental health therapists. So same such, what we're trying to do, and what many are already doing, is cross referrals. So one of the things that we talk about in our trainings, and that we actually do, and that I'm encouraging in policy and practice, is to write into your policy at the pre-conferencing, the pre-work stages of relationship building with your clients, that you are able to identify needs and to support the people that are, coming in with those needs, to cross-refer them to get the help that they wish to have. And welcome, Linda. I just want to say hello. If you wouldn't mind turning off your video just for today's session, that would be wonderful.
I was trying to do that. I'm trying to do that, actually.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you.
So a warm welcome to you, though, and also to our other guests today. And we're going to go into some questions to Amber in just a moment. We have about 20 minutes left today in our discussion, and we'll be coming back in 2 weeks for a full 3-hour session workshop
Mm.
on restorative justice practices within family law systems recommendations. But just to go back to Amber's point, that there's a really important piece that restorative justice can do, no matter whether it's in the beginning implementation of exploring it in family law or alongside and with courts, that in policy at the early stage that we're working with our clients, we write into that policy the ability to cross-refer our clients and to take the time needed for them to get what they need and for us to stay working with them, but not to rush it. I always go back to my friend and colleague, Dominic Barter's quote, and he enacts it beautifully with his work in Brazil and worldwide in restorative circles. He says this work is too urgent to rush. So one of the things that we're also facing is the tendency in our systems to rush the work, that there needs to be an itinerary and a timeline that is very particular. And this just cannot be in certain cases. We need a lot more time. In other cases, maybe it would fit neatly into that tidy package of, okay, you've got a 3-month timeline to intake, to process, to do the restorative justice, and to be done with a signed agreement. And it's just not that neat and tidy. Sorry.
I couldn't agree with you more, Molly. I couldn't agree with you more,
Yeah.
because what restorative justice does, which is very, it's absolutely the same. Actually, I was going to say similar, but it's the same to my holistic approach, is to give clients, as you said earlier, possibly the very first opportunity in their life. That's a big statement, you know, that they've gone through school, they might have gone through workplaces, they may have come in and out of groups of friends, but maybe this is the first time that they have an opportunity to sit in a space and take a breath and pause and reflect and look back and assess and see, you know, what they've done so far and why and how they've come to, you know, what the circumstances are that have all the dots, you know, let's tie all the dots up, draw the line through the dots, sorry, to get through to where they are today. And so, as you say, we can't impose timelines on healing. It's impossible. At the same time, you know, I think that one other point I wanted to just raise about adversarial systems as you know, versus the restorative justice or holistic justice approach, is that part of that healing in restorative justice circles is the circle process, or is the family group conference, or is the victim offender conference, right? In my holistic approach and my own personal model that I've created, it's very similar. It's let's get people together, if it's safe and appropriate, of course, and have the conversations. Now, when we're in court, what it looks like in court is client A hides behind lawyer A, client B hides behind lawyer B. And it's not hiding, obviously, but what I mean to say is that they're not given a platform in which client A and client B can speak to each other directly.
Right. Their voices are taken away.
Voices are taken away. It's
Yeah.
a very disempowering, very disempowering kind of experience. And they're probably already feeling quite disempowered with the shock of the trauma of whatever it is that's happened that's led them to this legal dispute or legal issue that's got them in a courtroom to begin with. And so in the adversarial process also, lawyers will tend to manage cases in ways, I'm not saying again that this is a conscious thing, that they could start managing and advising in ways. For example, like, don't talk to your ex. Don't speak to them about X, Y, and Z, because when we go to court, we'll tell the judge this, that, and the other, which means that I've had clients come to me after they've been through other law offices when they've wanted to change representation, saying, when I started out, at least my wife and I were on speaking terms, but by the end of 6 months with these lawyers involved, we don't speak to each other anymore. And this is having a really bad effect on the children. And I think children is also another thing I wanted to mention, because for me, one of the core reasons I became a family lawyer was with the view to be very child focused in these cases of family, in these family cases. And, you know, sometimes when I say to people, yes, you know, the adversarial system can cause physical symptoms, they'll be like, oh, well, it can cause stress and this and the other, but physical, yes, physical symptoms. I've had clients whose kids have started bedwetting again. who don't want to go to school because they fear if they go to school, something might happen to mommy or to daddy. They're having nightmares, they have tummy aches. So there's all sorts of different physical manifestations as well of the stresses when parents are at war with each other in these adversarial systems. And so again, the holistic approach, the restorative justice approach, the circle processes and so on, these are beautiful spaces. And when, as you say, facilitated by trained individuals who are following, obviously, as you say, a set process and guideline, as you say, this is not woohoo, and this is very important. It's giving the parties a voice again. It's empowering. And it's giving them an opportunity to restore some of those relationships.
Absolutely. That's one of the points that we will be looking at, of course, throughout this and more deeply next time in 2 weeks when we come back together. How can we cultivate the conditions for increasing elements of truth and accountability to arise, and for there to be voice? And it's very complex. We're not trying to, neither Amber nor I are trying to paint over the complexities. There are so many complexities that are coming into the space. In fact, they're quite intimidating. Let's just say it. And they can include gender and racial implications, as well as, of course, domestic violence and all of the bundle of things that you can think of. But what I really appreciate, Amber, that you're raising too is children focused. Like, how can restorative justice practices be children focused as well in the practices themselves? And so we're really at the cutting edge. I don't think that I've identified, well, actually, that's not true. Marge Thorsborn, and let's see, there's some people out of Minnesota, and I will talk to Kay Pranis about her recommendations from what she has done with family law practitioners up there, because I know that there are people that have formulated practices that do invite working with the children as well. We're not saying in one big happy kumbaya conference again. We're saying working together with each individual and asking permission along the way, and having the even the policies and the paperwork in place that people sign off on to continue to increase the safety of the container that we build. And then eventually, in some cases, going towards a full conference together with the exes and even potentially the youth that are involved. Just like any restorative justice process, it's voluntary, it's confidential when it's well held. And paperwork, I've seen paperwork do amazing things to uphold and to even increase the ability for parties to feel at ease, if you can even say that, to speak the truth and to feel a sense of being heard. One other piece that I'd love to just thank you for raising is the presence of attorneys. I mean, you're an attorney. There's so many wonderful people in law who are in family law. We're not saying that they're wrong or accusing, criticizing family lawyers. Okay. We're inviting collaboration. But it is true that not by their fault that the presence of divorce attorneys within the family law system creates a very big wall, and it does remove the parties involved voice. It has implications that increase stressors. It has implications that that are, you would never even guess are there until you're in it. and then you realize, wow, I feel like this isn't even about me anymore. It's just about the two attorneys and about the courts, which took away all my rights to speak and to be heard. And these people don't even know who my family is and who my child is. You know, there's so many implications that we're looking at that can be brought back to the people involved in ways that are safe increasingly, that are going to decrease all of the stress factors. So I'll stop there, but I know that you have some clients that have shared their experiences with you, have reflected upon what it's like to go through a holistic process. And I would just love to hear from you about that. And then let's welcome, if anybody has any questions, you can put them in the chat. You can also voice in today with the time that we have remaining. And of course, we're with Amber Turner from Amber Law. She's a holistic attorney and she's global. She's writing a book. Can't wait to see the results of that coming out. And it's just an honor to have you here. Really happy to have this conversation with you.
Thank you, Molly. The honor is mine. And thank you for the opportunity for me to share some of my clients' voices.
Yeah.
These are some of the testimonials that can be found on my website that I've just extracted because of the shortness of time, just some of the sentences, a few sentences from their quotes. One of the things that Nicole, for example, who was going through a separation, said was, when you are at your most vulnerable, it is essential to find someone you can trust and who not only advises you on the law, but also on what is best for your family at such a traumatic time for all. And then she said, I wish other lawyers would follow suit in this innovative and peaceful approach. Daphne said, I was very angry at the time and I was also very sad. I was overwhelmed with everything, so it was very difficult to speak. Very difficult because pain doesn't allow you to talk. Amber worked with positive emotions, positive feelings, and positive energy. Her input was amazing, and she carried me throughout the process. A guide and a leader, but in a gentle way. And I just want to just stop there a minute and just say when she said that when you're in pain, it doesn't allow you to talk, that's just such a powerful statement. And I, again, believe that's why we need these restorative processes in family law. Jeff said, Amber's goal, the goal was a fair result for everyone in the family. She looked after my well-being emotionally and financially. I would highly recommend this process to those who do not want to see their children being drawn into the court atmosphere. Asia said, if lawyers take care of clients as people, the legal problem as something that is happening to them, not only on paper, but at all levels, and to help them through this gateway, life would be much better, families will hold on better, and society will be better. And these are just some of the quotes, as I say, from some of my clients. And Joey said something very beautiful. He said that throughout the holistic approach and this holistic process, he said the ordeal of his divorce, in his case, became a process. And that process became a journey. And that journey became a new way of life. And that, Molly, is what it's about for me. As I say, it's taking a holistic approach that doesn't just look at your immediate client, that looks at everyone else they're connected to in the ripple of, not just in their immediate family, nuclear family, but grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, teachers, coaches, everybody who's involved in that person's life and who has some sort of impact on them and who are going to be impacted by that client's a state of mental well-being and emotional well-being. And so that's my wish for everyone, that we could infuse these restorative justice and holistic approach practices into family law systems in a way that takes care of the majority of cases. As I say again, I understand that the adversarial system has a place for limited, I would say, much more limited number of cases. But certainly in the majority of cases, at least in my own personal experience as a litigator of 17 years in this field, I've understood that in at least 80% of the cases, matters can be dealt with much more healthily, and which will stop the perpetuation of pain and suffering, and which will bring, as Joey beautifully says, a new way of life for these individuals and for their families and for future generations.
Mm. Thank you so much. I know you've got Dr. Howard Zer's little book of restorative justice there with
I
you
do.
this
I
morning.
actually,
And it, for those that are maybe fairly new to restorative justice, one of the things that he lays out in that book is the elements of restorative justice. He does a comparative between restorative justice and traditional track criminal justice. And one of the major differences between the two is that restorative justice is relationally focused, and it considers the ripple effect, the impact, which Amber was just speaking to, of harm and conflict. And so maybe some of you have seen the diagram online, or maybe in another presentation or what have you, where there's 3 circles and they're overlapping each other. And one of those circles is community. Another one is what we call the victim. I like to use the word the receiver, the person who received harm. The other circle is the offender. I like to use the word coined by Dominic Barter, author. So, and in many cases, especially in family law, you'll find that there's going to be, of course, the community that Amber just spoke to, the wider family, the extended family, as well as elements of receiver and author in both parties. So being able to give those people a voice in a separate step-by-step process that possibly can lead to a family group conference is a very powerful thing. Amber, I have a question for you. I want to again remind everybody, please visit amberlaw.com for more information about Amber's work in holistic law. And I want to ask you, from your perspective, and we'll talk about this at length in 2 weeks, but from your perspective, how do you see a diversion happening? And how did you start to welcome clients from being thrust into the actual traditional track of family law? So how does that work? How have you seen it work? I know how I've seen it work and not work, but
thank you so much for that question. It's an excellent question. People are waking up. That's the first thing I'll say. Clients are waking up. And so what would happen to me in my particular situation is that within my community, people started talking to others. It's word of mouth. So again, you'll see in the testimonial section to my website that a lot of the testimonials will say something like, my aunt recommended that I see Amber, or my cousin did, or my workplace colleague did. People talk, and people will recommend lawyers with whom they've had positive experiences, and they won't recommend those that they've had negative experiences with. So that's the first thing. So what happened was that I found that and this is an important point, although there were times when I have obviously been sending clients to counseling before they make the final decision on whether or not they should be separating or divorcing, whereas some lawyers would see that as me losing clients, it's actually had the opposite effect. I call it karmic profitability because it's like the law of karma. I say, well, I recommend people because it's the right thing to do. When people understand that you truly care about them, and not just them, but their partners, their children, and their family, and so on, and they get the help that they need, then as soon as somebody else comes up to them and says, do you know a lawyer, a good family lawyer, they're going to recommend you, because they understand that I didn't make any financial gain in that interaction, because I didn't believe that, and it came to light that that was not the right path for them at the time. People who were sure that they wanted to carry on getting separated or divorced, or that it was the right and appropriate thing to do, started coming to see me together. So they would say, can we be here together? Now that posed a bit of an issue for me, because the law in Gibraltar is such at the moment where parties need to have independent legal advice. So what I started doing was working with clients to say, okay, what we can do is we need to decide who's my client, and then the other party is not my client, but we can certainly work together. I can be here supporting you, working together to reach a settlement agreement that you can both live with, that you're happy with, that you're at peace with, insofar as we can. But then what would happen is, obviously, once that document was drawn up and drafted, one of the parties, the one who was not my client, would have to go and see another lawyer for independent legal advice on that settlement agreement, right? And that started happening on many occasions. So that was always a way of avoiding, it's always been a good way of avoiding going to court and having any kind of contested hearing. And of course, it's got to be done, again, safely with, you know, the proper financial and asset disclosure and so on and so forth. So it's not like a, you know, let's skip any kind of the formalities. That's not the case at all. But it was a way of avoiding a tennis match where lawyers are just literally, you know, bombarding each other with email missiles with very inflammatory language, which then upsets the clients and so on. Another thing I was doing, Molly, another way around, was there were times when my client and I would be putting forward very fair solutions that were family focused, child focused, not just client focused. And we weren't getting a positive response. The way that the rules work, at least in Gibraltar and under the UK law, is that I cannot directly approach the client on the other side, right? But what I would do then is speak to my client and say, have you spoken to your husband or wife, right? Depending on the situation. Can you please ask them whether they've even seen our correspondence? Have they even seen, has their lawyer sat them down yet to have a meeting and show them what we're proposing? And I'll tell you, Molly, I was quite shocked and very disillusioned to hear that there have been many times when those clients hadn't been shown the settlement agreements and the proposals. Now, unless there's communication, fluid communication between parties, this is the danger and the pitfall. I'm not saying that this is the case in all cases. I'm just saying that there can be exceptional cases where this kind of behavior is coming up, where lawyers are managing cases, but they're not communicating with their clients. So then clients start becoming suspicious. Oh, we've been very fair and they haven't got back to us. That's because probably and their minds and their imagination start going in all sorts of directions. When it's like, again, let's go back to clear communication, direct communication. Ask your partner, have they read this? Have they seen this? Have they understood this? You know, and then we've managed to get cases back on track. So there's been a number of ways of doing this. But as I say, there is definitely a movement of clients, and I can feel it. I can see it personally in my own practice and in many books I'm reading and other people I'm connecting with across the globe, where clients are saying enough. Mm-hmm. And I'm so grateful to you for Anodea Judith's call and her course online through your platform, because one thing that she highlighted was these pyramid structures, these power over structures are collapsing. And I sense that, I feel it, I've observed it, I've experienced it. So I can say that energetically, there is certainly, again, a shift happening. There is a paradigm shift happening. And people are understanding that we need to have more equality, not just between clients, but also between counsel, between attorneys, lawyers, and their clients. Let's stop looking over our clients as though, you know, we're the ones in charge. And let's come back to a space where we're actively listening, where we're present with our clients, and where they're given a voice and empowered, not only in telling us their story, but also in co-creating solutions to their legal problems. So these are just some ways I see this happening.
Wow, thank you so much. I know we're just slightly over time today. When we come back together in 2 weeks, one of the things that is going to be unpacked thoroughly is the nuances between that Amber has just been speaking to, between a traditional process, the specifics of why it doesn't work, as opposed to or as compared to a restorative justice process, and what it shifts in how it unpacks that underlying root cause to varying degrees, of course, but the power that it has to, in just a few prompts and reflective processes, redirect the trajectory of family law. Restorative mediators I believe, are already doing that. Mediation has the power to become more restorative with a few simple tools. We're going to look at those tools in 2 weeks and definitely have some ground level presentation, as well as more discussion and conversation together. But today, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you also to those listening in. I want to encourage you to check out Restorative Justice on the Rise on the web at restorativejusticesontherise.org. We're also on iTunes and we're on Spotify and have been podcasting for 12 years now. And Amber Law, that's www.amberlaw.com. So thank you again very much for being here with us, Amber, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for attending today. Thank you for the generosity of your time.